What's up, everybody? My name is Michael Canis. Welcome to my first music theory lesson applied to the guitar. I'm going to be talking about things that a lot of people wonder about regardless of their technical skill level. Things such as scales, modes, and intervals. Today, I'm going to define each of those as much as I can in this all-encompassing basic music theory lesson. To start, I'm going to define what a scale is. A scale is simply a pattern of intervals, a repeating pattern of intervals. An interval is simply a measured distance between two notes. For example, if we started on this note, A, and we wanted to go up an interval of 1, we would simply go up 1 fret. An interval of 1 is also known as a half step in music theory. Now, if we were started at that same note and go up 2 frets, that would be called a whole step. That's an interval of 2. An interval of 1 and 2 is all you really need to know right now. And we'll get into more complicated intervals later when we get further into the lesson. Now, before we move on, it's very important to be able to see intervals across strings as well. Otherwise, you're just stuck on the same string. You can't do a whole lot with that. So, let's say you're on that same note, 5th fret of the E string, which is A, and you wanted to go up a half step. You'd have to realize that the 5th fret of a thicker string is the same as an open next thinnest string. A string open is the same as 5th fret on the E string. So that's subtracting 5. And then to go 1 step ahead, you add 1 to that. So you're going to the next string and you're going back 4. So remember that. A half step up. So you go from that fret to the same fret of the string, next string up, and then you go back 4. And that's a half step. So to do a whole step, you do the same quick little formula. You go to the next string, subtract 5 to make it the same note, and then from there you add 2 for your whole step. That's 3 to the left after you switch to the next string. Okay, so these two intervals are how you construct scales. Let's start looking in depth to the most basic scale there is, the C major scale. First, we're going to start with the note C on the 8th fret of the E string. This note is called the tonic. This is think of it as the main note of the scale, the note that every other note is getting compared to, because the whole time you're actually thinking C major. Whether or not you realize it, your mind is expecting the flow of the song to eventually return to the sound of C major. So just remember that tonic is the first note of the scale. Okay, so from there we move on a whole step. Starting at C, we move 2 frets ahead to D. It's a whole step ahead. This note is called a major second. The reason it's a second is because it's the second note of the scale. And it's called major because it's part of the major scale. It could be called a minor second, but we'll get into that later. So from there we go on another whole step every time to the 3rd note of the scale, also called a major note, major 3rd. And the 3rd note of the scale, I want to point out, is very important because it determines whether the scale is major or happy sounding, or minor, which is sad sounding. So if you had a major 3rd, which is 4 frets from tonic, or an interval of 4, that would make it sound like a major scale. However, if you hit a minor 3rd, which is 3 frets from the tonic. And now it sounds like a minor scale. Okay, so again, we'll review this in more detail later. But for now, back to the C major scale, we have tonic, D, which is major second, E, R major third, and then from there we go up a half step. Except as I'm playing this, I arrive at my pinky here, which means in order to keep with the flow, I have to do a string switch. So I need to use that formula from before and go back 4 frets to do the half step. And that's our 4th note of the scale. This has a special name. It's not major or minor. It's actually called a perfect 4th, because most scales actually have the exact same interval for all 4ths of the scale. Their seconds, thirds, 6th, and 7th may vary, but the 4th note of the scale is always going to be an interval of 5 frets above the tonic. So here we've arrived at the 4th. The 5th note of the scale is a whole step above that. It's also called a perfect note because it's always, just about always, going to be 7 frets above the tonic. And you'll notice if you play the tonic and the 5th at the same time, you have a power chord. In fact, you'll often see in music power chords written as, in this case, C5 or E5 or A5. It's simply saying that you're hitting the 5th note of this scale and the 1st note together. So from there, we move on to the 6th, which is called a major 6th because it is a whole step above the 5th. Next is the 7th, which is a whole step above the 6th. But again, I'm on my pinky now, so I want to go to the next string. So I have to subtract 3 frets as I go to the next string. And now we're on our 7th, which is the note B. The 7th is also has a special name because it's a fret below the next tonic of the scale. Because of that, it's called the leading tone. It leads to the final note that we're going to talk about, this final C. This is where the entire pattern of the scale repeats all over again. So again, memorize these intervals right here, and from there you can construct a major scale starting on any note on the E string. Now, in our next video, we will discuss the modes.